So welcome back to our office classroom annex and managerial accounting. Purpose of this brief video is to review the take-home part of the exam. There were 4 questions. Each of them were worth 10 points. And most of you did pretty well on these things, but there's still an opportunity to learn from the mistakes of others. Let me go through each of the take-home questions. And I'll emphasize, having graded them all, where people made mistakes and got confused. So let me share my screen here. And I do this by adding highlights. Let's go back to the first question here. Okay, so the following department information is provided for a company. This is question 33. Determine the dollar amounts to be allocated to the different departments. So you're allocating this under the sequential method, and you're allocating support costs, and you want to allocate, the question is, determine the amount of the janitorial department to be allocated to cafeteria, cutting, and assembly. So we know from our previous discussions of janitorial costs that they're best allocated on the basis of square footage. So if you want to allocate the square footage, the total amount of the cost that you have to allocate what is it? Total costs of the janitorial department, 150,000. So those need to be allocated on the basis of square feet. So you add these up, 20,000 of square feet in cafeteria, 4,000 in cutting, and 16,000 in assembly. So you set up a ratio there, 20,000 plus 4,000 plus 16,000. So you don't include the janitorial square feet because the janitorial department you want to allocate. So the amount of costs that go to cafeteria is 20,000 divided by the total of 24 and 16, which is 50%. 50% of 150,000 is 75,000. As far as the cutting department has 4,000 square feet. Same denominator, 4,000 divided by the combined total of 20,000, 14,000, 16,000 gives you 10%. 10% of 150,000 is 15,000. And then the last one, when you figure it out, it's 40%. 40% times 150,000 gives you 60,000. So before you declare victory and celebrate the fact that you got it right, make sure that you've allocated the full amount of the costs. So the janitorial costs are 150,000. And if you allocate them 50%, 10%, and 40%, and you take 75 plus 15, that's 90, plus 60, that's 150. So that's the allocation of the costs. Next one, a number of you got confused. Here we're allocating joint costs, and we're allocating joint costs, and they tell us to allocate these on the unit, on the net realizable value method. So they gave us the information to get the market value at split off, but they didn't allocate on that basis. They allocated on the basis of net realizable value. So net realizable value of face cream is 75, body lotion is 35, and soap is 4,000. You add them up, 7,500, 3,500, and 4,000. So that's your denominator. So what's that? That's 10, 11, that's 15,000. So 7,500 divided by 15,000, the total amount of joint cost that you were allocating is given at 200,000. So 50% of those joint costs go to face cream. I think that's whatever percentage that is, 3,500 divided by the total of these times 2,000 gives you 46,000. And for liquid soap, it's 4,000. 4,000 net realizable value divided by the total of all these times 20,000 gives you 54,000. So there's your allocation, and you want to make sure that you have allocated $200,000 worth of joint costs. You have incurred $200,000 of joint costs, and if I add those all up, 100 plus 46 plus 54, that does indeed give us 200,000. So the thing you had to be careful there was you're using net realizable value, not market value. So there was no need to multiply the number of pounds produced times the market value, because that's not how they allocated it. They didn't use market value, they use net realized value, which we're given. Okay, number 3, you manufacture 2 products and you have to get the break-even point for sales. So that's the combined amount of sales for both units. The break-even in sales in terms of the number of units you have to sell for S and T, and then sales necessary to achieve an operating income. So that's a number of you lost point here. Sales of units of M necessary. We didn't ask for the dollar sales. We asked for sales of units. So if you didn't give me the sales in units and give it dollar, the sales and sales value, sales volume, you lost a couple of points there. So first of all, get the unit selling price. So what we want to do to get the break-even point, we want to get the composite selling price of product S, the composite selling price of product T. So it's 60% of product S, 60% of $30 for product S, and then it's 40% of product T. So 60% of 30, 40% of 70. That gives us a composite selling price of 46. And then for the sales cost, it's 60% of $24 plus 40% of $56. That gives us a combined amount of $36.80. So the unit contribution margin, given the mix of the 2 products, is $9.20. Divide the fixed cost of $202,400 by $9.20. So they break even at 22,000 units. But that's the composite level. So now in Part B, they say of the 22,000 units, how many for product S, how many for product T? So 60% from product S, so 60% of 22,000 is 13,200, and 40% from product T, 40% of 22,000 is $800. And then the total units to break even, not only to break even, but to achieve an operating profit of 119,600. So you not only want to break even, you want to actually have an operating profit. So you take the sales, you take the break-even point plus the targeted profits divided by the contribution margin per unit of the composite units, and you come up with 35,000 units would have to sell to achieve a target profit of 119,600. Next one, what you've got to do is they give you the results, and you've got to prepare an income statement using the absorption costing and using your variable costing. Now, some of the information is going to be the same for each of these things. You know there's going to be a difference here because you produced 550,000 and you only sold 42,000. So you're going to have 8,000 units in ending inventory. And when you use absorption costing, those 8,000 of the ending inventory are going to include amount of fixed overhead in there. So since there was no ending inventory to begin with, because it's a brand new operation, you can assume the inventory increased by 8,000 units. So before we go any further, when we contrast the 2 financial statements, the absorption costing has got to give us the higher net income. Now, the sales were $18 a unit. So when you get the actual number of units sold, it's 42,000 times 18. That will give us our sales revenue in both cases. Some of you screwed up the sales revenue. So they sold whatever 42,000 is times 18. That's your sales volume. The other things people screwed up is the ending inventory. There is ending inventory in both absorption costing and under variable costing. So under absorption costing, the ending inventory, you're going to have to take 655,000 and you produced 50,000 units. So 655 divided by 50,000, that's your cost per unit under absorption costing. And under variable costing, your cost per unit in terms of the ending inventory there, you're going to have a variable. You have to take the variable cost of 575,000 divided by 50,000. So that's going to give you the variable amount to be included in ending inventory. With those, and the other differentiator between the 2 methods here is variable costs are going to be expensed under both scenarios, but the fixed costs are going to be fully expensed in the variable costing, the fixed manufacturing cost plus the fixed selling and administrative expenses. So with that background, here goes. So the absorption costing income statement, there's your sales revenue. So how did I get that? I took 42,000 times 18, that gave me 756. Cost of goods manufactured under absorption costing is 655. But I got to consider the ending inventory. And they told us we had 8,000 units in ending inventory. And to get the ending inventory, it's 655,000 to produce a unit divided by 50,000 units. So that gives me, and then you multiply that by 8,000 units. So there's my ending inventory under absorption costing. So the cost of goods manufactured minus the ending inventory will give us the cost of goods sold. Subtract out all the selling and administrative expenses, and then you get 163,300. Now, before I go any further, I know I had an increase in inventory. If you have an increase in inventory, you know absorption costing is going to give you a higher net income figure than variable costing. So variable costing, the sales is the same, but your cost of goods sold is only a variable cost of goods sold. So the variable cost of manufacturing is 575,000. And then when you consider the ending inventory, the ending inventory cost is 575,000 divided by 50,000 times 8,000. So your variable the variable cost, including in the inventory, is 92,000. So there is your cost of goods sold on the variable costing. That gives you your manufacturing margin, out of which you subtract variable selling and administrative expenses. Then you subtract out all the fixed costs, both the fixed manufacturing cost and the fixed selling and administrative expenses. So your operating income under variable costing was 147,500. And absorption costing, it was 160,300, which is what we expected because we had an increase in the inventory. And if you produce more units than you sell, we know that absorption income will give you a higher operating income. Okay, I was very pleased with the results here. I don't know if it was the handout or it was my inspirational lecture, but just about all of you got this correct. Where there were errors that were made in this schedule, so you just had to follow the pattern of the exhibit here to get the cost of goods sold. So finished goods inventory plus goods manufactured, extreme right-hand column, give you goods available for sale, minus finished goods ending inventory gives you cost of goods sold. So that was to get your cost of goods sold. But to get that, you had to figure out how much materials were used, how much labor was used, how much manufacturing, factory overhead was used. That gave you your total manufacturing cost this period. You had to add that to beginning works in process, subtract out ending work in process, and that gave you the cost of goods manufactured. Where people made errors here was basically in the adding and subtracting. So where people made errors, again, is, some of you, when it came to work in process ending inventory, or it came to finished goods ending inventory, rather than subtracting, you added. Right? So spend a minute. You might want to freeze your screen here, hit pause and compare this to what you wrote down, and you can see where your error was. Right? So I would pause here and go line by line and see where, most cases, I would have given you a red X where you screwed up, if you screwed up. And the last one, this was very easy question. I thought easy question too, but some of you got really freaked out by are confused, is a better word than freaked out, by the amount of the revenues and the percentages here. So they collect 25% of its sales on account in the month of the sale and 75% for the month before. So they want to know what the amount collected was in April. So in April, actually, you're going to collect 75% of March's sales, which were 225, and you're going to correct only 25% of April's sales, which were 250. Again, you might want to pause your screen here and compare what you wrote down to what's written here. All right. So people did well on the take-home exam. That's good. That's good news. Don't ease up on that. The take-home exam tends to be similar to the homework, tends to be similar to what we do in class. So not to sound like a broken record, if you're behind on the homework, get caught up on it. You don't want to get a zero average in there. And not only does your good homework grade help your overall grade, it helps you in terms of preparing for the questions that are going to show up on the final exam as well. Okay, everybody, you have a wonderful weekend. Adios, au revoir, hasta luego, be well, talk to you soon.